What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Days back again with another video. So today it's the last video for this series. Um, we are doing the NCAA football stadiums, and today we're gonna be doing Big 12, ACC, Big 10, and the SEC. So yeah, we're doing the big boys now. So the top teams in the NCAA. Okay, so like I say, it's been a long journey. We did from the D2s all the way to now. So pretty much all I can say is it was a good journey, and also after this video, I'm gonna have another video out to show you my picks on what would be a good team to play with in the NCAA video game that's gonna come out pretty soon. And yeah, like basically the teams I pick is pretty much like what you're gonna play in your dynasty, and so what teams you need to play with your dynasty mode and stuff. So but other than that, let's get into it. Also, yeah, please, if you haven't seen the channel and stuff, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, Days Reacts, and also please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel Progress Gaming. You know what I'm saying? Where we're gonna be doing a lot of gameplay on the NCAA football game. It's gonna be on Progress Gaming channel, and also please subscribe to this channel as well too, y'all. Please, you know, Days Reacts, man. I'm doing the best I can. You know what I'm saying? But let's have fun, you know. But either way, let's get to this thing. Big 12. It is showtime. Let's get it, man. So Big 12, it's showtime. Let's see what you got.
Going from survival mode my whole life to having enough money to like take my kids on vacation. I had no idea how to run a business. I didn't know what.
The third conference we've pulled out of the hat is the Big 12, which, as the name suggests, consists of 12 big teams. Hang on, but I've only got 10 here. Have I mixed it up with the Big 10? What? The Big 10 has 14 teams? See, that's why you shouldn't name your conference after the number of teams you have.
Right.
Pac-12 is true to its word, for now. Anyway, let's just get into the stadiums. We start off with Amon G. Carter Stadium, home to the TCU Horned Frog.
TCU, right? Will you coach here? Absolutely. 5 years plus. 5 years plus. I would coach at TCU. Yeah, TCU. I would.
Although this stadium did open in 1930, most of it was demolished in 2010, and only the lower bowl was retained. So what you see is a fairly new stadium, and an absolute beauty in my view. It has a lovely brick exterior, but it's buff brick, which is a lighter shade than what you would usually see on a college stadium. And it's even better on the inside, with a huge 3-tiered stand on the western side, and there's even a little bit of covered seating on the east. Bill Snyder Family Football Stadium, home to the Kansas State Wildcats.
Right, will you coach Kansas State? I'll do 2 years at Kansas State. Kansas State. I'll do 2 years here at Kansas State.
If the last one's exterior wasn't interesting enough for you, how about a limestone castle? Actually, a castle-like exterior is surprisingly common in college football. On the inside, it's fresh off a major renovation. Well, it might still be ongoing, but when it's done, it will look like this. It's just one of many stadiums in this conference that have recently been renovated / currently undergoing renovations. Boone Pickens Stadium, home to the Oklahoma State Cowboys.
Right, will you coach Oklahoma State? Yeah, I'll coach Oklahoma State. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I'll do 5+ years here at Oklahoma State.
It's named after the late T. Boone Pickens, a wealthy donor. You mightn't like a stadium being named after a rich guy, but it's completely understandable. He donated over $500 million to his old school over the years. That is mind-boggling. This stadium is vaguely reminiscent of Lambeau Field.
Did I say how many years I do? 5+ years. 5+ years.
With the end cut off. The end that is cut off, the east end zone, which sounds strange to say because usually the field is orientated the other way, is overshadowed by the school's basketball arena, which gives the stadium a bit of a unique look. Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium, home to the Texas Longhorns.
Right, we coach Texas Longhorns. I'll probably do 3 years at Texas Longhorns. 3 years. Yeah, I'll do 3 years at Texas Longhorns.
Just like last week's video, the saying everything's bigger in Texas rings true, because just like Kyle Field of the SEC, this stadium is the biggest in the conference. And just like Kyle Field, it has a nice brick exterior. It's quite incredible that it has a capacity of over 100,000, given that the south end zone has hardly any seating. However, it is currently undergoing a major renovation that will fully enclose the field. It will also mean the replacement of the iconic Godzillatron video board. The renderings look incredible and it's expected to be completed this year, but the capacity won't actually increase significantly. David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium.
Right, will you coach Kansas? Well, Kansas University, they finna get a new stadium pretty soon. Will I coach here though? I'll probably do a year or two. Yeah, a year or two.
Home to the Kansas Jayhawks. A stadium that is 100 years old this year, fittingly has a very classical style exterior. The northern end at least. It has a facade similar to that of Harvard Stadium, or the old facade of Soldier Field. It's just a little less grandiose.
Now, if they would still stayed at this stadium and they didn't do no upgrades to it, like they finna get and stuff, and they kept the stadium looking like this would be a one and done. A one and done. But they finna get a whole new stadium, so I'll do 2 years.
You may have noticed that the stadium has a rounded shape at both ends. That's because for the longest time it had a running track around the field. It was only removed in 2014 after a purpose-built athletic stadium was built. Other than that, the stadium is quite simple, but good. Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium, home to the Oklahoma Sooners.
Right, would you coach Oklahoma Sooners? Yeah, I do. I'll give them 3 years. 3 years top. 3 years.
Now, I know what you're thinking. What's with the name? But don't be so immature. There's nothing funny about the name Oklahoma Sooners. I don't know what a Sooner is, but I'll find out sooner rather than later. It's yet another college stadium with a wraparound brick facade, although it's a little bit of a darker brick, in keeping with the campus's aesthetic. The grand facade is befitting of the stadium's nickname, the Palace on the Prairie. The south end zone was renovated in 2016 and now looks like this. It really does make the stadium look so much better. It turns out Sooners is the name given to the settlers who entered the unassigned lands in what is now the state of Oklahoma, before the official start of the land rush in 1889. Jack Trice Stadium, home to the Iowa State Cyclones. Unlike the last one, it's not named after a wealthy family.
Right, will you coach Iowa State? Yeah, I'll coach Iowa State. Yeah, I'll coach them. I'll do 4 years. 4 years with Iowa State. Yeah.
but something much more meaningful. It was named after the Cyclones' first ever African American athlete, who was sadly the first Cyclones athlete to die from injuries sustained during competition, in controversial circumstances. The stadium itself has a fairly unique design compared to the ones we've seen in this conference so far. The way the field is sunken into the landscaped earth means there's very little exterior to speak of. It's quite a nice design actually. I particularly like the south end zone. It's looking sharp. Jones AT&T Stadium, home to the Texas Tech Red Raiders. On first,
Right, will you coach Texas Tech? Yeah, I'll do 3 to 4 with Texas Tech. 3 to 4 years.
first impressions, you might think, it's just another college football stadium. Nothing special. But by far the most extraordinary feature of the stadium is the extravagant Spanish Renaissance-inspired facade. It looks absolutely incredible. On the inside, it's a little less extravagant, although a lot of the bleachers have been replaced with more ergonomic tip-up seats since these shots were taken. I like that they have that small section of grass behind one end zone with the double T logo. But behind the other end zone is the real deal, the iconic double T scoreboard, that despite lacking in technology has lasted since 1978. McLean Stadium, home to the Baylor Bears.
Right, would you coach Baylor? Yes, I will. I will coach Baylor. I would coach Baylor and stuff. So, yeah. Absolutely.
As with many typical college stadiums, McLean Stadium is in the shape of a horseshoe and has plenty of brick on the exterior. But that's where the comparisons stop because this place is far from typical, especially the wraparound roof canopy that shades some of the seats. It also helps keep the noise inside the stadium. The open end features a grassy hill as well as a huge video board. Combine that with the backdrop of the Brazos River makes for a view worthy of a postcard. Speaking of the river, just like Neyland Stadium in last week's video and Heinz Field the week before, fans can arrive to the game by boat. This has to be one of the most extraordinary college stadiums going around, all things considered. Milan Posca Stadium, home to West Virginia, is, I don't know if you could tell, but that
Right, will you coach West Virginia? I'll give it a shot. I'll do 3 years. 3 years in West Virginia. You know, I don't like the state, you know what I'm saying, but I'll do 3 years here.
isn't the original song. That was actually me saying ears to make it sound like Mountaineers instead of Mountain Mama. It was seamless, I know. And I do believe they pump that song through the speakers every game. Not my remix, the original. To the stadium now, the design was based off Jack Trice Stadium. In particular, the way the field is sunken into the ground, so only the upper decks are above ground. But renovations and expansions that have occurred since it was built have distinguished the two stadiums from each other significantly. But yeah, I like it. It seems like a nice leafy area as well, but I guess that could be said for most of West Virginia. And those were the big 12 college football stadiums. If you enjoyed the video, please...
All right, so that was Big 12. Shout out to them. Now we're finna do ACC. So Atlantic Coast Conference is showtime.
A CRM shouldn't weigh your budget down.
After making a few college football videos, some people suggested that I just go through every FBS stadium. And it's a good idea, but there are just so many stadiums, so it makes sense to go conference by conference. I'll be doing a new conference every week, and we'll start off with the Atlantic Coast Conference. Alumni Stadium, home to the Boston College Eagles.
Right, will you coach Boston? Absolutely. I do 3 years here in Boston. 3 years.
An unassuming classical design, but that doesn't mean it's boring. It actually hosted the New England Patriots for a year in 1969. They were known as the Boston Patriots back then, of course. And back then, the stadium looked a lot different. It even had a running track. That was gotten rid of when the stadium was renovated in the 90s. An interesting little tidbit is that every winter, an inflatable bubble covers the field in order to use it as a training facility in the freezing temperatures. They even put batting cages in there. Doak Campbell Stadium, home to the Florida State Seminoles.
Right. Will you coach Florida State? Absolutely. Absolutely. I will coach Florida State and stuff. Yeah, I will coach them. I'll do 5 years plus.
It has what is arguably one of the best looking exteriors in college football. The beautiful brick facade that wraps around the entirety of the stadium is in keeping with the architecture of the campus itself. There's also a huge stained glass window that depicts Bobby Bowden, whom the stadium is named after. Well, the field rather. The interior is a little underwhelming by comparison, but it's not bad at all. And it's got to be hard to compete with that exterior. Bobby Dodd Stadium, home to the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets.
Right. Will you coach Georgia Tech? On the cool, I'll do 1 to 2 years with Georgia Tech. One, if we do make it to a bowl game, then I'll try to do a back to back, and then if I do make a back to back, then I'll have to see what I'm saying it is. But yeah, I'll do 1 to 2 years here at Georgia Tech.
When they play Florida State, is it called the Battle of the Bobbies? Unlike the last one, the exterior is nothing to write home about. But it does have one notable feature, if you want to call it that, and that's the magnificent view of downtown Atlanta. And they have even stacked the seating on the north and western sides of the field in order to A, not block the view, and B, allow more spectators to have that view. It does make it look a little unusual, but in a good way, I think. Wallace Wade Stadium, home to the Duke Blue Devils. It's a college that gets a lot of hate, but more so for the...
Right, will you coach Duke? One and done. I mean, this facade right here looks beautiful, but to me, it's still like a one and done type of stadium.
Their basketball team. No hate should be directed towards the stadium though, because it's not bad at all.
It's not.
Just like Alumni Stadium, it too used to have a running track, but it was only removed 5 or 6 years ago after a major renovation. An interesting anomaly occurred in 1942 when this stadium hosted the Rose Bowl instead of, the Rose Bowl. This was due to the West Coast's vulnerability to a Japanese air raid. Of course, AT&T Stadium hosted the 2021 Rose Bowl for a completely different reason. Cardinal Stadium, home to the Louisville Cardinals.
Right, will you coach Louisville? Absolutely. I will coach Louisville and stuff. So, yeah, I do 5+ years. Yeah, I do 5+ years here in Louisville.
It's located right next door to the famous Churchill Downs, home to the Kentucky Derby. It's got a bit of everything, this place. It's very modern and NFL-like on the inside, yet the exterior isn't too far removed from a classic college stadium. It just looks a little more cutting edge. And this stadium is a rarity in college football, given that the seating is made up entirely of bucket seating. The stadium's north end zone seating was expanded only a couple of years ago. Scott Stadium, home to the University of Virginia Cavaliers.
Right, will you coach Virginia? Yeah, I'll coach Virginia. I'll do 3 years here at Virginia.
Located in the leafy surrounds of Virginia is this beautiful horseshoe-shaped stadium, which, given they are called the Cavaliers, is rather appropriate. A horse rides into the stadium before every game as well, so there's plenty of horse action. One of the stadium's best features, in my opinion, although some might disagree, is the grass hill behind one of the end zones, which, if the weather is good, seems like a nice place to sit back and enjoy the game. However, if it's raining, or even worse, snowing, it would be horrible. So you're really gambling when you purchase a ticket in this section. Carrier Dome, home to Syracuse Orange. Is their team named after the color or the
Well, I'll coach Syracuse. I'll probably do one and done. One and done with Syracuse.
fruit? That doesn't really matter, because their stadium is something very special. It's the biggest dome stadium on a college campus, and it also hosts basketball, making it the biggest college basketball arena as well. However, it doesn't quite reach its football capacity. The stadium has recently undergone a renovation where the inflatable roof was replaced with a steel cable-supported one. It's a similar story to Canada's BC Place. Clemson Memorial Stadium, home to the Clemson Tigers. The stadium also goes by the name Death Valley, and I can understand why. The field kinda looks
Right, will you coach Clemson? No. I won't coach Clemson. First time, big stadium like this, I won't coach Clemson. I'm sorry. I had to do a one and done with Clemson, but really it just like I can't do it.
looks like a
I'm not
green
being
gully
biased
between two steep rocky mountains. As for the death part, well, I suppose that has something to do with the sacrifice of a small goat that occurs before every game. I
That's one
swear,
of them.
some of these college football traditions are quite strange, but you gotta love it. Or maybe it has something to do with the cemetery next door.
That
Not
too.
sure. But what I am sure of is that this is one imposing structure. And just like Alumni Stadium, it too hosted a professional team for just one season. That was the Carolina Panthers in 1995. Hard Rock Stadium, home to the Miami Hurricanes and the Dolphins, of course, but this isn't an NFL video.
Would you coach the U? Absolutely. I will coach the U. But I would have to get a whole new stadium. You know what I'm saying? A whole new stadium that represent just the University of Miami and stuff. So, but yeah, I'll coach the U.
The stadium started off life in the 80s
I'll do 5 years with the U.
as a fairly simple stadium without any roof canopies. It was designed with a wider field than usual, so it could accommodate baseball. However, this wasn't an ideal situation, and in 2015 it was renovated into the football-specific stadium that we see today, although it does host a tennis tournament once a year. The new design looks incredible. The exterior has a wraparound porch look to it, and the interior's vibrant color looks fantastic. Heinz Field, home to the Pittsburgh Panthers.
Would you coach Pittsburgh? No. Matter of fact, yeah, I'll coach Pittsburgh. But they gotta get their own stadium. I'll probably do 5 years with Pittsburgh to see if I can get my own stadium, own football stadium. That's all I want.
And the Steelers, of course. And the fictional team, the Gotham Rogues, featured in The Dark Knight Rises. A lot of the time when a college team plays at an NFL stadium, it's an afterthought. But the Panthers were involved with the project from the get-go, basically. It is just a stone's throw from PNC Park, one of the MLB's best stadiums. You don't get quite the same view from the seats of Heinz Field as you do from PNC Park, but the view is still pretty good if you're sitting in the right seats, due to the open end on the river side of the field. Oddly enough, both the Pirates and the Steelers' old stadium was situated right between the two new stadiums. Keenan Memorial Stadium, home to the North Carolina Tar Heels. It is considered by...
Right, will you coach North Carolina? See here, North Carolina. I'll give it a shot. I'll say 3 years for North Carolina. 3 years. Yeah, 3 years for North Carolina.
by many to be the most beautiful stadium in college football. And that is up for debate, but it does have a lot going for it. For starters, there's plenty of trees surrounding the stadium, and a nice little clock tower. Also, the extensive use of brick throughout looks pretty good. And the metal bleachers were recently replaced with Carolina blue seats, which reduced the capacity but increased the audacity. No, that doesn't make sense. It made it look better and made it more comfortable for the fans. All that combined makes for a great stadium. Lane Stadium, home to the Virginia Tech Hokies. Huh?
Right, we coach Virginia Tech. Yeah, 3 years. 3 years top.
Oh, Virginia Tech Hokies. First impressions are that the exterior is very monochromatic, but importantly, it is one of the many college stadiums that resembles a castle. I would ask why they do it, but the obvious answer is, why the heck not? Just like the last stadium, there are plenty of trees within view, and when autumn, or fall, swings around, the leaves are roughly the same color as the team's jersey. The atmosphere at this stadium is known for being incredibly loud for its size. Truist Field, home to the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. This relatively small stadium is reminiscent.
Right, will you coach here? Wake Forest? I'll probably do 2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years.
Of many different small college stadiums across the US that have roughly the same design made up of 2 stands. However, this one is just that little bit better. Once again, it has a grass hill at one end. That's good. But more impressive is the facade of one of the stands. It is in keeping with the general aesthetic of the Wake Forest campus. I quite like this stadium. It's simple done right. And last but not least, Carter Finley Stadium, home to NC State Wolfpack.
Right, will you coach the NC State? I'll do 3 years here as well. 3 years.
Another stadium that did have a grassy hill behind the north end zone, up until a grandstand was constructed in the mid-2000s, which changed it from a horseshoe to a bowl stadium. The seating is now made up of a mix of bench and bucket seating. The facade of the main stand has more of a modern look than most of the other stadiums in this conference, and due to the fact that the field is sunken into the ground, the rest of the stadium doesn't really have an exterior. And those were the stadiums of the Atlantic Coast Conference.
All right, that was Atlantic Coast. That was the ACC. Now I'm finna go to the Big Ten. So Big Ten, it is showtime, baby. Let me find you. Where you at? Big Ten. Yeah, that's right. You only got one video, Big Ten? I guess so. So, Big Ten. It's showtime. Let's go.
Hey, got a second? I'm going to show you how I got the flexibility to code, create, and experiment my way.
By end zones. is a big conference with some big stadiums. You just have to ignore the numerical aspect of that name because it's a straight up lie. Anyway, let's try to rank the stadiums. Ross-Ade Stadium. Just because I've put it low.
Purdue. Right, will you coach Purdue? I'll do 2 years here in Purdue. 2 years.
Doesn't mean I think it's
2
bad.
years.
I mean, with a name like the Purdue Boilermakers, you won't have to worry about washing your hands with cold water for starters. The simple and clean horseshoe design is perfectly fine. What little frontage there is looks great, as does the black and gold seating. There's a sizable video board with a large party deck underneath. I just think it's a little too basic to put it above any of the others for now. It is, however, set to undergo some major redevelopments at the end of the season, so that's good. SECU Stadium. This is very similar to Ross-Ade, but what puts it ahead of it is rather than just a simple horseshoe layout, they've added some impressive, steep, multi-tiered premium seating, as well as a couple of very steep upper decks over on the north, from which you get a great view of the campus. Those added features make the stadium a little more to my liking. And as unimportant as it is, I do quite like the Maryland.
Who this is? It's Mass. Yeah, it's Mass. What you coach here, right? Mass? No, Maryland. It's Maryland. My bad. Baltimore. What I coach here? 2 years. I'll do 2 years.
From which you get a great view of the campus. Those added features make the stadium a little more to my liking. And as unimportant as it is, I do quite like the Maryland flag-inspired end zones. For the most part, Ryan Field is to stadiums as Ryanair is to airlines. It serves a worthy purpose, but the amenities are a little bit...
Right, will you coach Northwestern? 1 to 2 years. One really is a one and done, but I'll do 1 to 2 years.
Bit rough around the edges. However, the best aspect of this stadium goes against all the principles of Ryanair, and that is the grand castle-like facade of the Western Stand. Pretty cool. There are some more oddities on the inside. This section, which is just confusing, but also this unique arching upper deck, which I quite like. As I mentioned earlier, it's not in the best condition, but this too is expected to be renovated in the near future. Spartan Stadium. On the surface...
Ray, will you coach Michigan State? Yeah, I'll probably do 2 to 3 years with Michigan State.
The stadium doesn't look all that interesting. The exterior is pretty dull on all but the more built-up western side, and it's not that much better on the inside. What does it have going for it? Oh, yes, it's the only stadium in the conference that's named after the team's nickname, so that's not anything, actually. Oh, it has a natural grass field. I like that. But yeah, it's a decent stadium. I'm sure it does the job. However, there's just not that much jumping out at me that sets this stadium apart.
Right.
SHI Stadium. In some...
Ray, will you coach Rutgers? This stadium right here, it'll be 1 to 2 years. 1 to 2 years.
In some ways, it's similar to Spartan Stadium, mainly the symmetrical design with the similar ruler-shaped upper decks on either side. But I think it has a slight edge over it. Yes, it's smaller, and yes, there's less video board coverage, but it's a little more aesthetically pleasing for starters, and more importantly, the best feature by far that this stadium has to offer is its cannon. A lot of people say it's outdated technology. And yes, it's not going to be taking down tanks anytime soon, but it has absolutely no trouble taking down a streaker, which is great entertainment. Memorial Stadium. Despite not being the oldest stadium in the conference, this...
Ray, will you coach Illinois? Illinois, yeah, I'll do 1 to 3. It'll be a 3-year contract. I'll coach him for 3 years.
Probably has the most old-fashioned look to it. It shares some similarities with Franklin Field, college football's oldest stadium. Firstly, the shape of the seating layout, but also the grand exterior, albeit quite different from Franklin Field. It contains hundreds of limestone columns. It looks incredible, but the stadium does also have some less desirable aspects of an old-school design. It really doesn't maximize crowd noise, so the stadium doesn't get much praise for its atmosphere. Kinnick Stadium is comfortably middle of the road as far as the Big Ten goes.
Ray, will you coach Iowa? Iowa, this would probably be a 2 to 3 year stadium for me. 2 to 3 years.
Interestingly, it's the only stadium in the conference that has a completely separate stand on each side, all of which have a proper brick exterior. So yeah, it's a solid venue overall. But one downside is that there is a children's hospital next door, and the children like to wave at the spectators in the stadium, and you are expected to wave back, so that's a bit of a hassle if you're just trying to eat your hot dog in peace. I am, of course, joking. That's a very endearing tradition. Memorial Stadium. A lot of people may have expected this to take the number
Ray, will you coach Nebraska? Nebraska, I'll do 5 years plus here in Nebraska. Yeah, 5 years plus.
one spot. The number one ranked Memorial Stadium, that is. But no, there's still one to come. Other than its grandiose facades and its distinctive end zone seating, it's famous for the fact that once full, the stadium more or less becomes one of Nebraska's largest cities. It goes Omaha first, Lincoln itself second, this stadium third, and then it falls off a cliff. The next largest city is Gatlin, famous for its appearance in Stephen King's Children of the Corn. Man, they really do love their corn in Nebraska. Camp Randall Stadium. Now, this is the oldest stadium in the conference, and normally
Ray, will you coach Wisconsin? Yeah, I'll coach Wisconsin. I'll do 4 years, 3 to 4 years here in Wisconsin.
try not to consider history too much when ranking, but I'm a bit of a history buff, and the fact that this place was built as a venue for the game between the Union and the Confederacy to decide the outcome of the Civil War is just remarkable, almost unbelievable. But it must be true. I read it on the Wisconsin Badgers verified Twitter account. Anyway, what I like about this stadium most of all is that it seems to be very cozy. Okay, perhaps that's not the best word for it, but you know what I mean. Beaver Stadium. They're always
Ray, will you coach Penn State? Penn State, I will do 3 years in Penn State. Just 3 years. 3 years in Penn State.
seems to be at least one stadium's placing that I know is going to be controversial. I feel like this is one of them. It's a stadium that gets a lot of praise for its traditions and atmosphere, which many would consider the best in the conference. As for the stadium itself, however, it's kind of like LSU's Tiger Stadium. The extensions that have been added over the years don't exactly blend in seamlessly, so it's not exactly pretty. I do like, though, how it's called Beaver Stadium, and they've put a giant beaver on the side of it. A particularly athletic and predatorial-looking beaver. Memorial Stadium. From afar, this stadium might seem plain and simple, but when you
Ray, will you coach Indiana? This stadium, Indiana, I'd coach Indiana. I'd probably do 1 to 2 years in Indiana. 1 to 2 years.
take a closer look, there are some very impressive features. To the north of the stadium, we have this Hall of Champions, which is absolutely spectacular. If the entire exterior looked like that, well, they'd be broke, but it would be up there with the best exteriors of any stadium in the world. The interior is simple by comparison, but the huge single-tiered western stand, which was once the one and only stand at the stadium, is quite impressive. Yeah, I think I like this stadium more than most people probably do. It mightn't necessarily look it, but Michigan Stadium is the biggest stadium in the country.
Right, will you coach Michigan? I'm gonna leave that to my family member. Uh, I'm gonna leave that to my deacon. My deacon went to Michigan, so I'm gonna leave that to one of my deacons. So this would be probably if we have a NCAA league and stuff. This will he will pick this team. You know what I'm saying? And they world champions too. Uh, so yeah. I'll probably if I had to coach Michigan, I'll probably do. I'll probably do 3 years. 3 years.
For which it gets the nickname of the Large House. Hang on. Was it? Yeah, the Large House. I was second guessing myself there for a second. Its simple and clean design, consisting of an uninterrupted single-tiered sunken bowl, mightn't be exciting, but it's certainly elegant and makes for an incredible atmosphere. The facilities are great and are in very good condition, so you might be wondering why it's not number one. Well, like I alluded to earlier, it's just not the most interesting design. Perhaps they could have added some dragons or something. Huntington Bank Stadium is the newest venue in the conference, although
Minnesota. Right, will you coach here? This is where Brock Lesnar played at too. Yeah. Minnesota. I'll probably do 2 to 3 years here in Minnesota. 2 to 3 years.
the average onlooker may not necessarily be able to tell, because they've done a great job incorporating the old school college football stadium aesthetic, in particular its wraparound brick exterior. Unlike most older college stadiums though, there are a heap of chairback seats done up in the Golden Gophers colours. To cap it off, they've left the western end zone mostly empty and moved the video board to the side, allowing for a great downtown view.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much more you could ask for.
All right.
Ohio Stadium. Unlike Michigan Stadium,
Buckeyes. Right, will you coach the Buckeyes? Ohio State? Yeah. I had an Ohio State jacket that I had to get rid of. Because my parents, they were like, man, you love that jacket so much, you wear it every day and stuff. So yeah, Ohio State, I'll coach here. I'll probably do 4 years here in Ohio State. Yeah, 4 years.
Stadium and has one of the most imposing exteriors going round, including the Pantheon, which is perhaps even more majestic than the Hall of Champions in Indiana. There's no let-up on the inside with its intimidating double-decker horseshoe seating layout, which is the most famous of all horseshoes. And yes, despite the southern end zone seating, it's still technically a horseshoe, because that isn't connected to the rest of the stadium. At least that's what they say. It is one of my favorite stadiums in the country, but if I had to try and point out a flaw in this stadium, there's one. That's a flaw. So there you have it. The Big Ten stadiums.
Okay, so that was the Big Ten. And last but not least, the SEC. But before we get into that, there is NCAA Independence League. So NCAA Independent. Yeah. So let's do this video first, then we'll go to SEC. So this is a bonus video. If y'all don't know.
Some people just know that the best rate for you is a rate based on you with Allstate. Because you are
NCAA independent teams, it is showtime.
Based on you.
You've probably heard the phrase too cool for school. But what about a school that's too cool to be put in a pool? And by pool, I mean conference. But that doesn't rhyme, you see. Anyway, here are the stadiums of the independent FBS teams. Aggie Memorial Stadium, home of the New Mexico State Aggies. Straight away, you
Ray, will you coach New Mexico State? I do 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. Really, just 2 years. No, outdoor concourse. One and done. This is a one and done.
will notice the unique design where the earth goes all the way to the top of the seating, despite there being 2 tiers of it. You don't see that too often, and it was an interesting choice considering it's a fairly arid climate, meaning that the grass isn't always in the best of shape. But that's not the grass that matters. That grass is artificial. I noticed that behind the north end zone there's an array of plants in lieu of a grass berm. Kinda wish they did that for the entirety of the exterior. That definitely would have been one of a kind. This building here looks like it's straight out of Miami Beach. But yeah, cool little stadium. Markey Stadium, home of the Army Black Knights.
Shout out to the Army, shout out to the Navy, and shout out to the Marine Corps, shout out to the Air Force Base. Thank y'all for your service. And shout out to Coast Guard too, and National Guard. Can't forget about y'all. Thank y'all for your service. And shout out to the NASA Corporation. Thank you for your service. But yeah, if I had to coach the Army team, and God rest my dad, you know what I'm saying? God rest his soul. He was a Army veteran, 20 years, first sergeant, first class. And shout out to my late uncle too. He passed too. The one before he came before my dad. He was in the Army as well. But I'll probably do 3 years here with the Army. If I want to be a coach with the Army, I'll do 3 years. 3 years. 3 years to life. Yeah.
It's a stadium that's held in very high regard, and that's partially due to its location in the beautiful leafy surrounds of the West Point Military Academy on the Hudson River. But the body of water that you see right there is actually a reservoir, not the river itself. Nonetheless, water is water. The campus itself looks incredible, and I wish the entire stadium's exterior was built in that same style. That would have been epic. It's not, but there are a couple of nods to that style of architecture. And considering the team are called the Black Knights, it's quite fitting. Yeah, this stadium deserves this reputation. Beautiful. Lavelle Edwards Stadium, home of the BYU Cougars.
Right, will you coach BYU? I'll probably do a year or 2 with BYU. Now I keep getting BYU confused with Yale, so you know what I'm saying. But I'll coach 2 years with BYU. I think it's the logo that throws everybody off, and me. So
this stadium's design is slightly unusual in that it's like many bowl stadiums that you'll see, just with empty corners. And of course, it's not a bowl. All the stands are separate. The exterior is very bare bones. It's just exposed steel and concrete for the most part. But that's not the stadium.
All right. Now where was we? Oh yeah. We was doing this. Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Stadium strength. I often talk about the view that spectators can enjoy from their seats, but Lavelle Edwards Stadium is all about the view. I guess they've kept the stadium rather simple so you don't get distracted from the spectacular mountains that make up the backdrop, particularly if you're sitting on the western side. Stunning. Find me a stadium in Utah that doesn't have a stunning backdrop, and I'll give you $10,000. For legal reasons, I have to point out that I'm referring to 10,000 Zimbabwean dollars converted into US dollars, which is less than 1 cent. So I'll have to round that down. Notre Dame Stadium, or
Right, will you coach Notre Dame? Notre Dame, that has to be a 5-year plus school for me to coach at. Because of heritage they got going on with them. But in my opinion, I'd at least do 2 years because Notre Dame football is pretty much like a transitional school to me. So, yeah, 2 years. 2 years in Notre Dame.
or Notre Dame Stadium. Tomato, tomato. Who says tomato? I do. But at least I don't say potato, that's just weird. It's home of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, definitely the most well-known independent team. The design shares some similarities with college football's biggest stadium, Michigan Stadium. But it's a lot more built up, it's not sunken into the ground, and it's much more beige. But one thing that sets it apart even further is that it's the only stadium in the world with its own personal touchdown Jesus. But I think the Iranians have copied that though, because they all seem to have their own personal touchdown Ayatollah. And of course the North Koreans have their own touchdown Kim. But that actually predates the touchdown Jesus. Oh, and I should mention that those initial shots were taken during construction. This is what it looks like now. Pratt and Whitney Stadium, home of the Yukon Huskies.
Wait, Ray, will you coach UConn? UConn, the Huskies, I'll probably do 3 years with the Huskies because it's not a bad stadium. So, yeah, probably do 3 years with the Huskies and stuff.
Well, I think it more often goes by the name Rentschler Field. It was the name of the airfield that the stadium was built on, which belonged to Pratt & Whitney, a company that makes these things. It's the newest stadium in this conference. The newest independent stadium. It's not in a conference. And it's fairly apparent. It just looks very cutting edge, literally speaking, how the seating is at sharp angles, and how the upper deck comes to a point in each corner, much like Arrowhead Stadium. I like it. But it still remains a fairly simple stadium. There's not much to the exterior for the most part, but it's a fine stadium, and UConn take that to the bank. Really? Do you think anybody's going to get a laugh out of that? I just thought of it then. But UConn take that to the bank. Some things are just better off left unsaid. Alright. Okay? Okay. Good. Warren McGurk Alumni Stadium, home of the UMass Minutemen.
Will you call UMass? This pretty much is a one and done for UMass. Give or take, this is a one and done for Massachusetts. One and done.
It's the smallest of the independents and one of the smallest FBS stadiums. You may have noticed the strange concave shape behind each end zone. I'm not sure why they did that either. Unlike many stadiums where the seating is sunken into the ground, here it's quite the opposite. The lowest of the seating is elevated above the field by, I'd say, a good 12 feet. The design was like that to begin with, but they sunk the field further into the ground to accommodate more seats. But other than that, it's just two of the same stands on each side, nothing but a video board behind one end zone and a training center behind the other, which looks quite good, and its convex shape is a perfect fit. Williams Stadium, home of the Liberty Flames.
Wait, will you coach Liberty University? I'll probably do 1 to 2 years at Liberty. 1 to 2 years.
Firstly, since these shots were taken, the stadium has changed quite drastically, and I'll get to those changes soon. But the western stand has remained the same, which is good because it looks great. Particularly the exterior, which backs onto the mini track and soccer stadium. The other side has since become a double-decker stand, and they're also planning on making it a complete horseshoe behind the south end zone, which is currently a grass berm, albeit artificial grass. And those were the FBS Independence Stadium.
All right, so that's the independent stadiums. And now we about to do the main attraction, the SEC stadiums. Let's get it. Let's go. SEC. It is showtime.
What amazing ideas do you have buzzing around in your head? Turn your ideas into...
In our second installment of the weekly college football series, we've pulled the Southeastern Conference out of the hypothetical hat. And it is a big one. Not the hat, the conference. It features some of college football's most valuable teams. So here are the SEC college football stadiums. Bryant-Denny Stadium, the Sweet.
Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Crimson Tide, Roll Tide. The House. The who built? I think it was Frank Broyle. And the one and only Nick Saban. The house that Frank Broyle built and the house that Nick Saban completed. Pretty much complete. I don't know how you say this, because it's like this. Frank Broyle actually built Alabama football organization. He won championships in Alabama. Then you got Nick Saban, who is next in line to carry the torch of Frank Broyle and what he brought to the table for Alabama to what it is today and stuff. So it's like Frank Broyle built the program and Nick Saban succeeded the program. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to Alabama. Will I coach here? Absolutely. But I got to be on my A game for Alabama. I'll probably have to do 5 years plus with Alabama and make sure I make to every bowl game. If I don't make the championship, I got to make to every bigger college bowl series bowl game. You know what I'm saying? So shout out to Alabama.
Great home of the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's the 10th largest stadium in the world, but it's not even in the top 3 in this conference. That's insane. The exterior is a bit hit and miss. There are sections with a beautiful brick facade, and sections that look a little bit more like a parking garage. The interior is great. There are some sections with bucket seating and small sections of covered seating, and a sizable video board in each corner of the stadium. Davis-Wade Stadium, home to the Mississippi State Bulldogs.
Hey, will you coach Mississippi State? Be real with you. I'll probably do 3 years here at Mississippi State.
The exterior is somewhat similar to the last one, albeit 3-sided. A beautiful brick facade, a parking garage. It's one of the oldest college football stadiums going round, but I must say it's looking mighty fine for 117 years old. An interesting but completely useless fact about the stadium is that the Bulldogs' original Bulldog mascot, Bully the Bulldog, is buried underneath the field. In case you were wondering, it was a real dog. They didn't bury a costume. Fluoro Field at Memorial Stadium, home to the Missouri Tigers.
Right, will you coach Missouri? Mizzou? Yeah, I'll coach Mizzou. I'll probably do 4 years in Mizzou. Yeah, 4 years.
A stadium famous for its Big M. A brand of flavored milk where I'm from, but an iconic symbol of Missouri in Missouri. It was built from leftover rocks after the construction of the stadium. But it's not the only stadium with a Big M, mind you. I wonder who was first. The stadium's south end was recently redeveloped and now looks much better. And there's even some yellow seating to go with the team's colours. It's a nice, well-rounded stadium, this one. Bit of old, bit of new. Kroger Field, home to the Kentucky Wildcats.
Ray, will you coach Kentucky? Yeah, I'll coach Kentucky. I'll probably do three years here in Kentucky. 3 years.
For some reason, I hear people say it has one of the worst names for a stadium. From what I understand, Kroger is a chain of grocery stores. But just remember, it could be worse. It could be named after Aldi. F*** you, Aldi. You pathetic excuse for a supermarket. And what do you call this? Plagiarism. Get lost. Anyway, sorry for that. The stadium itself it's looking pretty sharp. It has a nice modern exterior, a fairly symmetrical seating layout, and I like how they have those skyboxes in each corner. Kyle Field, home to the Texas A&M Aggies.
Ray, will you coach Texas A&M? Yeah, I'll probably do 5 years plus. 5 years plus.
They say everything is bigger in Texas, and this conference embodies that saying perfectly, because this is the biggest stadium in the SEC. This one has another stunning brick facade. I know there are a dime a dozen in college football, but this one is especially nice. Not quite Doak Campbell level though, but close. On the inside, it's quite spectacular. There's a nice mix of those maroon bucket seats and bleachers, which traditionally would be stood on rather than sat on, but I guess that's against the rules now. Neyland Stadium, home to the Tennessee Volunteers.
Ray, will you coach Tennessee Volunteers? This is a community-based stadium, which I like. Will I coach here? I'll do 3 years. 3 years in Tennessee. Really 2. Yeah, 2 to 3 years.
It's a very intriguing looking stadium. Parts of the exterior look excellent. The riverside, however, looks a little scaffoldy. On the inside, it's very monochromatic. But I think it's one of those stadiums that looks better during the game, when it's filled with fans wearing orange and white. The design is pretty cool as well. You have those typical double-decker stands on the sides of the field, and those double-tiered wraparound semi-circle type stands behind each end zone. Oh, and apparently there's a morgue or something underneath the field, or at least nearby. It's a bit of a secret. Very few people have actually had access to it. I hear that some people are dying to get in there. Thank you. No, thank you. Jordan Hare Stadium, home to the Auburn Tigers. It's quite a straightforward.
Auburn? Ray, will you coach Auburn? Yeah, I'll coach Auburn. I'll probably do 2 to 3 years. Probably 3 years. 3 years with Auburn.
Stadium, this one. There's no extravagant exterior or anything like that, and the interior is fairly typical as well. What to say about it? Well, it has a larger capacity than its City of Auburn's population, but that's not uncommon in college football. Perhaps the most interesting thing about it is that it's the former home of the legendary dual sport athlete Bo Jack Horseman, who eventually went on to play in both the NFL and MLB, and incredibly became an all-star in both... hang on a second. That can't be right. Oh, Bo Jackson. Of course, no horse. Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, home to the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Right, will you coach Wu Pig Sooie Razorbacks? Come on, y'all. This is the state team. You know what I'm saying? This is my state team. This is the main this the daddy. You know what I'm saying? This the daddy of all, UAPB, Arkansas State, UCA, all them teams. This the daddy. So yeah, I'll coach Arkansas, but I'll probably do 5 years. 5 years. Put my name in the books. 5 years plus.
The exterior on this one looks fairly modern, with plenty of glass being used. Not bad. On the inside, it's a tale of two end zones. One has 3 tiers of bucket seating, the other has no seats at all. Well, I should say had no seats, because it looks like this now after it was expanded. And I gotta say, it makes a world of difference. Not just to the capacity, but it just ties the whole place together, and it takes it from a good stadium to an elite stadium. Sanford Stadium, home to the Georgia Bulldogs. The stadium was built in a small...
Ray, will you coach Georgia? I'll probably do 4 years in Georgia. 4 years.
Valley, and actually sits on top of a creek. There's something satisfying about the way it looks, the way it's nestled into that small space, with barely any wiggle room. The most notable feature of the stadium, though, are those famous hedges that surround the field. They have been there since 1929, but they aren't the original hedges, of course. It turns out hedges are not immortal. I think it looks great, and I'd like to see more of it. But of course, if anyone else were to plant hedges around their field, then they would get called out for copying Georgia, so it's probably not going to happen.
Now streaming on Hulu. I love you! What are they doing letting us in a place that's nice?
Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, home to the Florida Gators of Gatorade fame.
Right, will you coach here in Florida, in Tallahassee, in Gainesville? I'll give it a shot. I'll do at least 3 years. 3 years with Florida. 3 years.
This stadium has a bit of an interesting design. It's not quite a perfect bowl. It's more like, I don't know, the way the stands are at sharp angles almost looks like the stadium was designed to fold up after you use it. And I'd imagine if you did fold it up, it would kind of look like a crunch wrap. I really like this stadium, and I think it would look even better if the seating was all blue and orange. But it's getting there. And I think everyone should get free Gatorade, because you'll probably be sweating at this place.
Right.
It is called the Swamp for a reason. Tiger Stadium, home to the LSU Tigers. There are few stadiums in the world that could challenge.
Right, well, you coach LSU. You know, I'm a Wu Pig Sui guy, and I'm also a Roll Tide guy. LSU, I'll give it a shot, but I'll probably do 3 years. Give me 3 years with them. I'll do 3 years with them. 3 years.
Tiger Stadium when it comes to an intimidating atmosphere.
But they do need a whole new stadium, because this all this like that ain't gonna fly with me. But 3 years.
And it's not hard to see why. Other than the huge capacity, the configuration may have something to do with it. The way that southern end is made up of multiple tiers of very steep seating, allowing the fans to sit right on top of the action, would have the great man BoJack Horseman himself shaking in his boots. Nike, I think they were. I also kind of like how it looks like several different stadiums have been fused together. Vanderbilt Stadium, home to the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Right, will you coach Vanderbilt? Okay, so Vanderbilt, I'll give it a chance. It's probably be a 1 to 2 years if I can't build this organization back and stuff. But I'll probably do 1 to 2 years in Vanderbilt.
There's not much.
This is pretty much like your transitional stadium in the SEC. So yeah.
To speak of when it comes to the exterior. There are hits of brick, but the rest is just exposed support beams. Not the prettiest, but I suppose some people would like that raw look. It's a very simple horseshoe-shaped design with bench seating and a small grass berm at one end. There's not too much else I can say. It's simple but effective, I guess. Vaught Hemingway Stadium, home to the Ole Miss Rebels.
Ray, will you coach Ole Miss? I'll probably do one and done for me. It's one and done for me with Ole Miss.
It would just look like a fairly typical college stadium if it wasn't for the roof canopies on the east and in particular the south end of the field. Those sections look great, but they also remind me of an opera box where the VIPs sit in comfort while the peasants bake in the sun or soak in the rain. Not that it would rain in an opera house, but you know what I mean. This one even has a funky curved roof, presumably to block the sun from people's eyes. The south end also has a pretty grand facade that looks a lot better than the other sides of the stadium. And finally, Williams-Brice Stadium, home to the South Carolina Gamecocks.
Ray, will you coach Carolina Gamecocks? University of South Carolina. I'll probably do 34 years tops in Carolina. So, yeah.
I have been known to get my Carolinas mixed up, so let me just double check. Yep, South Carolina. The stadium goes by the clever nickname The Cockpit, or just Willie Brice. Both nicknames have one thing in common. The stadium is known for having an incredibly loud atmosphere, although to be fair, most in this conference do. And just like La Bombonera in Argentina, the stands often sway and vibrate when the crowd is jumping around. This one in particular. It spawned the phrase, "If it ain't swaying, we ain't playing." The stadium itself looks quite modern, and if it had bucket seating, it wouldn't look out of place in the NFL. I think it's that lighting setup that makes it look newer than it is. And those were the Southeastern Conference college football stadiums. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing. We'll be going through a new conference every week.
So yeah, that was the end of the video. So yeah, so that was the Big 12, the Big 10, the ACC, and the SEC. Those were all them stadiums. Look, whew, and we are. I can say this: we are done, and we also did the independent stadiums as well. We are officially done with NCAA stadiums. Okay, whew. Now, please like, comment, subscribe to the video, and also catch me next time where we will do the decision on what type of stadiums and or schools that you need to play with in the NCAA video game that's going to come out in a couple months, NCAA 25. So, but yeah, please like, comment, and subscribe to the video, and I'll catch y'all later. Deuces.